Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to a very special online event called Stop Trying to Fix Yourself. Overcome the myth of self-improvement and discover the keys to mindful self-renewal. My name is Stephen Dinan. I'm the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I'm delighted to be here today with a new teacher to me and to the Shift Network who really is offering some very powerful and poignant teachings that have to do with shifting our whole orientation from trying to fix ourselves into really relaxing into the fullness of who we are and experiencing a renewal from that. Her name is Deborah Tull, and she is a Buddhist meditation teacher and author, and she really is inviting spiritual seekers to apply the Zen teaching of compassionate self-discipline and relational mindfulness to realizing your deepest dreams and purpose on behalf of the greatest good. She spent 7 years as a Buddhist monk in a silent Zen monastery, and she has really done this remarkable synthesis from different Buddhist teachings with also Western psychology. So welcome, Eden, to today's program.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Well, we're going to have this hour with Eden, and I just want to let everyone know up front that we have a chance to go much deeper with her in a brand new upcoming 7-week program you'll hear about towards the end of the hour. It's called Threshold to Freedom. So more to come on that. But Eden, let's begin with a little bit of your backstory, since I always find it's, first of all, it just is fascinating to hear more about what drove you to create the teachings and practices that you have. And also, I think it inspires our listeners for their journey as well. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your own journey from making this pivot from trying to fix yourself to mindful self-renewal, and what really precipitated that in your life.
So I came to practice both inspired by, I would say, personal suffering. And one of the definitions of suffering I love in Buddhism is subtle, incessant dissatisfaction. And really, as a young person, aware of the ways that greed, hate, and delusion were operating in the world that I was inheriting. So when I was 11, one day out of the blue, my dad, who I was so very close to, received the information that he had 1 month left to live. And that was kind of the first time I was hit by the avalanche of impermanence. It was incredibly difficult and hard to deal with grief in a world that doesn't quite welcome grief. But also I got to witness my dad, who had a contemplative practice himself, bring his life to a closure of grace and gratitude. And that made a huge impact on me as a young person. And while he was dying, he shared with me that what had mattered the most was not what he had made of himself or his career or how much money he had made or not made, but it was the quality of his relationships with his loved ones, with people in his life, with himself, with spirit. And I really took that to heart. That was an incredible gift to receive as a young person, that clarity, and it inspired my path very much. So at the end of high school, holding both my personal grief and my grief for the state of our world in my heart, I set off on a journey to find alternatives. I began my meditation practice. I learned how to grow my own food and live in cooperation with land. And I set out seeking some of my heroes. Then it was in the field of sustainability. And in this time of opening to so much possibility, so many alternatives, I became very aware of how we operate in adversarial relationship, both within ourselves and in relationship to nature, with one another. So that I noticed that even in the world of change agents that I was then grounding myself in, doing this work that felt so important in the world, there was finger pointing, burnout, competition, judgment. It didn't hit me right. It didn't seem authentic. I knew there was more. And so at the age of 26, I kind of set all of that aside, and I chose to become a Zen Buddhist monk for the next 7.5 years. And that took a lot of courage, and was also an incredible time of transformation, deepening my spiritual practice, becoming a teacher, And even when I left the monastery 7.5 years later, my practice continued to deepen and deepen. It will keep deepening until my last day here. But it was a transition of harvesting from all that I had received and then learning how to apply it more fully, living in this world of so much beauty and so much contradiction, so much conflict, and learning how to teach others. And that transition involved moving from a silent monastery in the wilderness to the megatropolis of Los Angeles. So it was a pretty uncomfortable but also beautiful move. And I simply became very devoted to simplicity, devoted to the simplicity and depth of the teachings, and devoted to allowing whatever it was that came my way be my spiritual opportunity, be my invitation for growth and for letting go. And that's a big part of what I teach. So thank you for the question.
Well, Eden, thank you for sharing so deeply of your life story there, and really illuminating why this pivot is so important. And I was struck by something you said about your parents, like there was a conditional loving, that is the culture in which we've grown up, that to somehow we use love as a manipulation to reward certain parts of ourselves and suppress other parts of ourselves. And that's, 98% of people get some level of that programming growing up. And that
Yeah,
really speaks to the heart of what you're saying, is that like the effort in self-improvement practices becomes a mirror of that same kind of conditional loving.
you've got it. And I would say for most of us, I mean, I had incredible parents, yet they were also doing what had been passed down to them. Conditional love gets gifted to us through media, through society, through school, through simply the conditioned thought field. So many people are used to carrying kind of an invisible dividing line within that says parts of me and therefore humanity are worthy, are lovable, and parts are not. And they're going about all of life through that kind of dualistic lens. And it causes a tremendous amount of suffering. It's a misconception. It's not true. And it causes a continual relationship with the mind of separation, kind of this tendency to stand outside of life, looking in, always judging and measuring and comparing ourselves and others, rather than learning how to work with ourselves and see ourselves clearly. And also we keep going from there, how to work with the natural world, how to work in partnership with nature and partnership with our own nature. So the impact is big of releasing the dividing line of conditional love. Yeah.
So what I'm getting is that you're sort of like, we take in this patterning, then we apply it to ourselves. And so then we're conditionally loving with the different parts of ourselves. And then we also are extrapolating that into the outer world, is what you're saying, is that our relationship with nature is another reflection of that.
Absolutely. There's so many examples of how we relate with the natural world through that lens. And we can also say that it's very unfortunate, but our economy, which is quite dispassionate, is very rooted in this myth as well, and then perpetuates the messaging through a lot of marketing. There's something wrong with you, something that needs improving. You have to try to become your best self, which only ego would hear that and then try to fix and improve what's already whole. And so when we begin to acknowledge our wholeness, when we actually see clearly, which is a big piece of the shift, then we can learn how to work with ourselves in a kind, skillful way that actually speeds up our growth, that actually allows, let's say we were talking about a garden, when there's soil that is well nourished, that is being treated kindly and sustainably through the process, rather than just going for this product of I want the biggest, the fastest growth, I want to produce this food in the least expensive way, and we're looking through the lens of product, we do all kinds of things to the soil that are not in alignment, that are not helpful. So when we're working with ourselves in this way of really committing to process rather than product, and to trusting the wholeness that's already here, then we can simply begin to get ego out of the way and allow our deeper gifts, our inner strength, our resilience, our tenacity, our creativity to come through more organically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's a great perspective. One question. So I think that a lot of people would probably agree with that in theory, but then they might say, well, but what about this part of me? So let's just say the part that just wants to be super lazy and doesn't want to do anything. So
Mhm.
that's kind of
Mhm.
the underpinning philosophy, is like we use, in a way, we crack the whip a bit over ourselves to get over our natural laziness or other things like that. So how would you reframe that for people who
Sure.
are struggling with that?
I think that's a great and a really relatable example for people. This brings us to the topic, which is well covered in the course, of compassionate self discipline. And so most of us have been fed an unhelpful definition of discipline that's kind of about force, structure, pushing yourself, cracking the whip, as you said.
Hmm.
It also tends to be about, again, seeing ourselves through the lens of improvement. And later we'll be talking about the new year threshold. We see ourselves through the lens of improvement, and then we want to set these new year's resolutions to finally whip ourselves into shape. Compassionate self-discipline comes from a really different place. It's based in compassion, and it's based in clear seeing. So when I talk about clear seeing, what I mean is, through meditation, through mindfulness, we learn very naturally how to see clearly and know our inherent goodness, true nature, authentic self, because we're deep listening enough that we begin to get in touch with that. We begin to understand the extraordinary nature of ordinary self. And we also get a really keen understanding of our ego and how our particular form of ego operates. And so then the game becomes learning how to nourish authentic nature, learning how to make the choice that comes from inherent goodness, learning how to nourish that part of us, but also having eyes open to how our egos operate, and then learning how to, with tenacity, with compassionate self-discipline, through the spirit of repetition, again and again and again, meet that skillfully. So, for instance, a lot of people live in the duality of laziness versus force or push or going all out. And compassionate self-discipline helps us to find a middle way in there where our ego is not in the driver's seat. Ego relates to both laziness and force, but we're actually just coming from more of an authentic pace, right effort. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned the New Year's impulse to sort of like drive ourselves to be to the next level. So I'd love for you, how would this orientation that you're offering really enable us to set intentions in a different kind of way? So maybe guide us in a process of how would you set intentions in a way that's more organic, that's more about self-renewal, and so that we do fulfill what we're here to do it, but not coming from a place of, whip cracking.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first I'll share that I truly love the new year and the invitation of new year as a threshold. I love the invitation, especially as we spoke for a moment about impermanence, of really taking time at the end of the year, at the beginning of a new year, January, to reflect deeply, to look at the whole past year of our life, not through the lens of judgment or measurement, comparison, but through the lens of compassion and being willing to really harvest the lessons from a whole cycle of our life. So the invitation to bring one whole cycle of our human life to a graceful close, and then being willing to renew, to allow ourselves the gift of renewal. We can only renew, we can only really step into a fresh, open place of possibility when we are deep listening in such a way that we're getting completely beyond the habitual messaging of our conditioned mind, when we're looking, as we will in the course, at some of the identities we cling to, the busyness that we get caught in just in the roles we play in life, the patterns that we get caught in. And we go deeper into the inquiry of, what are the limiting beliefs that I'm not aware of? What are my blind spots? What are the limiting beliefs? Because we all have limiting beliefs we're aware of. What are the ones that I'm really ripe and ready to see now and to let go? And what is the inquiry that helps me to finally release those beliefs so that I can get to what's underneath, so that I can get to the power and the beauty and the authenticity of who I am free from that limiting perception. So
Hmm.
that's a big part of getting to that place and then setting intention from that place, not from the ego who loves to set New Year's resolutions. If you're anything like me, your ego likes to set New Year's resolutions from the place of, let's set a goal that's so intense you're going to reach it for 3 weeks and then crash completely, right? Or let's set a goal that's based on something, some failure from the past that you're finally going to redeem. Instead, we actually do work about forgiving the past, letting go completely, making our peace with what has been, so we can access our truer self, so we can let kind of the instrument of who we are become more evident to us, and then work gracefully with that instrument and set intentions from that place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting because you have to apply that what you're saying, this mindful, a very mindful, compassionate stance at each stage of the process. Because these undercover beliefs, and probably the tendency is to like then layer on some of the old self judgment on top of those beliefs. And so you have
Yes.
to kind of each step of the process, you have to take the medicine.
You've got it. You've got it. And you have to bring fierce compassion to the process. And so this invites a real awareness and acknowledgement that sometimes compassion is gentle, sometimes compassion, let's say we're just invited to be compassionate for another, means just sitting and feeling with, being in that empty space, that space of receptivity with another. Sometimes compassion means coming in with tenacity, with the strong energy to say no to a limiting belief, the energy that is fierce enough to say, stop, I'm willing to drop that habit pattern now and to help myself do that once and for all. Both expressions are of compassion, but one is more yin and one is more yang, we could say. So we need to cultivate both in spiritual practice, both as meditators. It's really important.
So maybe it'd be good to just have a little bit more background on your overall approach to mindfulness. It sounds like you've got a very beautiful, organic kind of approach to mindfulness, and it's drawing from Zen. But I think it sounds like you've got a kind of a deeper philosophy underpinning what you're sharing as well.
Yeah. Well, I would say that my greatest teachers in life have been Zen and have also been the natural world. The natural world is an incredible teacher in a more mindful way of being. It's an incredible teacher in Dharma, in truth. And so I'll go back to the story that I shared earlier. When I was making that transition as a young person to really seeking support for waking up myself, and the very first thing I did was learn how to grow all of my own food, learn how to work compassionately with land. And I was very passionate about sustainable design then. And I have been a sustainability educator for years, and even now weave that into my teachings, because how we treat ourselves and how we treat our world is one and the same. We're either living an adversarial relationship or compassionate relationship. And I firmly believe that. And we can only learn to work in partnership with nature when we get out of the way and we learn some fundamental qualities that, in my experience, meditation teaches us. So there I was as a young person, learning both to deepen my meditation practice and learning how to grow food organically. And some of the qualities that were necessities for both are still so powerful in my life. And they are compassionate observation, just really being willing as a discipline to become observant, to pay attention. We can say that attention is the most subtle form of love. But in our world, we're so busy, often distracted by externals, to-dos, just the loudness of life out there, that we don't get taught to pay subtle attention or deep listen. Another was the quality of humility, being willing to get out of the way and be of service without attachment to what the outcome is. And of course, it's so ironic because through practice, we learn such incredible outcomes. Like what has grown in the garden of my life is mind-blowing to me. It's mind-blowing. It's everything that I could have dreamed of. And yet I didn't allow it through getting attached to those outcomes. I allowed it through observation and continuing to show up in the spirit of repetition with humility, learning to trust the process, learning to get out of the way and let spiritual practice happen organically. And so this again is why it's so important for me as a teacher to help people get that real practice doesn't really begin till this myth of self-improvement ends. And when it does, practice can take us further. It can take us to the place that our hearts are here for. And
Hmm.
yet so many people struggle. I know what my heart's here for, but I haven't gotten there yet. I'm still battling myself. I'm still, there's something wrong. There's something I haven't done yet that I need to. This kind of messaging. So I
Nice.
was really lucky to have incredible teachers. And I'll also add that after I left the monastery, which I left because I had been bit by a tick and I got Lyme, which anyone who's listening who's worked with Lyme or any other chronic illness knows it's incredibly challenging. And yet those same qualities of humility, of compassionate observation, they teach us how to let every single thing that arises in our lives, like the mundane challenges and the incredibly difficult challenges we don't know how we're going to overcome, they teach us to meet everything as a teacher of love and to get clear that that's as simple as spiritual practice is. And then things change because there's nothing externally that would come our way that we are not understanding as a teacher of love.
Hmm.
So, yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, there's so much to so many different areas we could go into. One thing I just want to honor you for is that sense of like, really working the soil, growing food, that it does teach a level of kind of receptive patience that I think we don't necessarily get in our cultures. We have an impatient culture that is driven and always trying to make something happen faster than it wants to happen. And that does create a bit of a disconnect in all of our beings.
You've got it. You've got it. And it's fascinating because through that disconnect, again, wanting to get to the product, having this quality of impatience, we miss so much. So, what practice, when we really drop into it, when we really commit to it, what it teaches us is to practice for the love of practice, that the process itself of evolution, of growth, of freeing ourselves from limiting beliefs, of letting go of unskillful habits, of getting out of the way so that our true self can emerge more fully. The process itself and every single step involved is incredibly beautiful. And we want to be there for it. And we want to
Hmm.
pay attention and slow down enough to be fed by it
Hmm.
rather than continuing to think, which again, the messaging is huge in our world through the media and everything, that there's a destination we've got to get to. Someone else is there and you're not. There's so much that comparison does to point to this. And I'll also just add that a lot of what I'm talking about has to do with finally being ready to heal the myth of separation within ourselves and to change our relationship with the mind of separation, that aspect of us that stands outside of life, looking in and assesses, judges, compares everything. It disrupts our relationship with ourself, our wholeness. It disrupts our relationship with one another because Steve and I could be here talking to you, listening to you, but my mind could be on something else or assessing what you're saying or planning what I'm going to have for dinner, right? It gets in the way of genuine connection, and it absolutely gets in the way of our experience of the natural world. We can be somewhere beautiful and not even be there for it. So it's really important to me to help people heal this myth, both for our personal benefit and because it is the medicine our world needs right now. From my experience, every ism we are facing, every challenge we are facing in the way of sustainability and social justice does come down to this myth of separation. It's a complete myth, and yet we've been indoctrinated with it to a degree that we don't even see it.
Mm-hmm. What kind of brings up an interesting question for me is that if so many of this is like, it's like the sea that we swim in, it's hard to even get to the deepest roots of this belief system and the separation that we feel and perceive. And so I'd love for you to just share a little bit more about the practice. So like, how do you start to just peel back those layers and start to shift and open and things into a deeper kind of relationship? If the starting point is that we have a lot of subconscious ways that we're creating this separation from our parts of ourselves and suppressing parts and kind of in a misguided attempt to make them grow faster. Like, how do you start to really unravel that in terms of a daily practice?
Well, one of the things I love the most about practice is how simple it is, based in simplicity and compassion in a world that is so complicated and, in fact, likes complexity. And so Practice is really simple. Sitting meditation, I like to say, is our training, and the entire rest of our practice, every aspect of our life. Uh, every aspect of our life is our practice, but training is sitting meditation. That's the easiest place to learn how to access stillness, receptivity, to learn how to see clearly. But we do not stop there. The point is to then bring meditation into how we move in the world, how we communicate with one another. That's why I wrote the book Relational Mindfulness, how we engage with our world at large, how we engage with the challenges that arise. And as soon as we plant that seed, and people generally have to plant the seed of awareness and protect it at first. Actually, I'll shift metaphors for a moment. It might be at first like a small flame that's lit. Maybe you read a book and it lights the flame of awareness, or you have an awakening experience, or you see a teacher talk. At first, you have to sort of protect that flame, maybe by going on retreats, maybe by doing this kind of thing, this 7-week course that's really going to give you steady support and interface with a teacher for that period of time. You need to show up each day to set intention, which we'll learn how to on this course, to meditate. But then it becomes stronger, and you begin to access and experience changes in your life. Wow, now I can bring this meditative way, I can bring this awareness into these different situations in my life, and I can see the impact, and it's amazing. And then it keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and you actually have to then bring it into the places that you may still be avoiding, or adversity in the world that you might still be turning away from, to allow it to continue to grow. It's meant to love all parts of you. It's meant to love everything. And to know how to access compassionate action in our world, we have to access that field of love that I'm talking about. Yeah.
Beautiful. Let's circling back to this notion of compassionate self-discipline, which I think is a really great concept. And just thinking about how does that, you do that in the practice. So for instance, there's always a little bit of a challenge, or a kind of like, oh, can I do 12 minutes today, and I only did 10 minutes yesterday? Can I call myself into an hour a day with daily practice? Or how from a compassionate self-discipline, how might you approach kind of building more of a solid baseline of sitting practice, and then also expanding that into
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, when I first did a meditation retreat, I had such a profound experience that my ego came in and said, this is so amazing. Let's now sit 2 hours a day, every single day. That was actually not compassionate self-discipline. That was ego. So ego was taking practice into its hands. That lasted about 2 weeks, and then it kind of petered out completely. So what I always encourage people is start really small. And of course, there are listeners who have been meditating for years and want to go deeper, people who are listening and are new to meditation. But for all of us, we're always meeting our practice from beginner's mind. So I like to say, start small. Start small and learn how to trust yourself to sustain that small period of time. So much of meditating, in addition to a regular sitting practice, is learning how to pause throughout the day for awareness. And once people learn how to just sustain it for a small period of time, they're already learning how to get past some resistance. They're already learning what are the forms of resistance that operate within me. So they're getting a lot of helpful information. It's like being a Zen detective, learning how to see how our own resistance operates. Then they have some more strength behind them to grow their practice. And honestly, they just get to grow it through the love of sitting. This is something I want to be doing. Not a good person should be sitting this number of minutes each day, and either I can or can't. So that's a conversation of separate self. Yeah.
That's beautiful. What would you like to share next? I mean, I can keep asking questions. I want to create the space for you to really kind of transmit the most powerful teachings that you want.
Well, I think I'll share, Stephen, I'm really, really excited about this course. I'm excited about it because for many years in my life, I've been engaging in this process of conscious intention setting. And then over the years, I've been leading retreats and sharing it with students. And the process has been shifting and growing. And I absolutely love this process. I look forward to it at the end of every single year and the beginning of a new year. I love the opportunity. I feel like it's such an act of love for ourselves to really intentionally bring a whole year of our life to a close gracefully and consciously, and to really harvest all of the lessons from that year and to renew ourselves. Again, even if we live to be 100 years old, our time here is brief, it's short. And so when we understand that, we understand the value of reflecting on an entire year of life and positioning ourselves to be in the most clarity and power. And I would say meditation teaches us to find our true power, but it's shared power. It's not power over. It's not that hierarchical power. So I really love the invitation to guide this process every year. I see it change lives every single year. And it's also just incredibly fun to see what comes through, what wants to come through people when they are willing to get out of the way a bit and get their own self-improvement plan out of the way. I feel like this past year in particular has been such a difficult one collectively. You know, we're in some really difficult times. And so a lot of people are looking out, kind of stuck in this duality of how can I really make a difference in the world right now? How can I be of service? What's happening is overwhelming. And they go to the other side, there's nothing I can do. They feel a bit deflated or paralyzed. And in fact, I feel like this is part of conscious response, is really giving your own self the deep listening, the reflection, the time to renew, to release, because so much of what we're releasing is also part of collective conditioning. So it feeds our collective healing to do this work and to let ourselves become more and more free and more powerful. You know, we can't really be of service fully in the world until we know how to include ourselves in the we that we are living in service to. So for me, this work is both an incredible personal benefit, and I get to, I feel sometimes like the luckiest person in the world. I get to see people's lives change all of the time, and I get to see people access the ease, because it's much easier than we think, spiritual practice, the organic unfolding, the effortlessness once you light that flame of spiritual practice. So for me, this is both a personal offering and a collective importance. It's really a time when, with so much difficult that's happening out there, it's inviting us to open our eyes more and to say, this is the very best opportunity we have had to wake up. Let's do it, and let's do it together. And it's incredibly fun as well. Spiritual practice does not need to be so serious. Yeah?
The way you hold it and talk about it is very much an expression of exactly the message today. It's not an expression you're trying to fix yourself or other people through this work. It's like it's a heart offering that you want to extend and share.
Yeah, you got it.
One question that kind of has occurred to me as we've been talking is that in terms of meditative practice itself, there's a lot of Buddhist meditation practices that put our attention or focus more on our breath or the movements of our body. It sounds like that you're also advocating to sort of meditate on the contents of our mind and our emotions and sort of witnessing them in a subtler way, so that we're becoming more aware of the patterns, almost like studying ourselves, not just naked awareness on breath or something, but it's like we're having this awareness practice where we're seeing the layers of ourself come to the surface. I'd love for you to elaborate a little on that, if that's accurate, or if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, and I'm going to repeat something that I shared earlier, this notion of sitting meditation as the training and then life as our practice. So in sitting meditation, in Zen, we do use breath as anchor, but we're really learning how to relax into the spaciousness that is always here, the compassionate awareness that is always with us. It never leaves us, but we regularly leave it, right? And we get to see through sitting meditation practice, through just coming back home to the ease of compassionate awareness, we get to see some of the habit patterns that take us away, even on the cushion. And then we're bringing that compassionate awareness into all of the rest of our life. So it's not that while I'm sitting, I am necessarily practicing inquiry into a particular area in my life, but it's that I'm learning through sitting how to be still and receptive and reconnect with the spaciousness that is always here. And then I'm learning how to bring that spaciousness into the rest of my life. And where I see something that is maybe an unskillful habit I'm caught in, or maybe just a story I keep going into again and again and again, or just something I'm curious about in myself, we practice mindful inquiry to investigate that. Yes, like a Zen detective. But a Zen detective, just go with that image for a moment. It means relaxing into the moment, really relaxing and observing at the same time. It's not an analytical process. It's not going into story or trying to figure something out, right? It's really about inquiring into something in the moment. And for me, that's where healing is. I wouldn't know how to get there through an analytical process. Yeah, yeah.
So, love for you to share a little bit about what happens when you fall off the wagon, when you get back into the self-criticism and so you really, people hear this, they get inspired by this, and then maybe for a couple days they're starting to shift and to do a little more practice, but then you get triggered by family situation and you're totally back in it. So, I'd love for you to share a little bit about, how to navigate where we fall off the wagon and go back into exactly that which we're recognizing hasn't been serving,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. And even that phrase, fall off the wagon, is an interesting one, because we were having a conversation about this at the end of a recent retreat. By the end of retreat, people tend to be in a really expansive, peaceful, very energetic state. And people who are newer to practice might have a fear, I'm going to lose this expansive state. Or as you just said, I'm going to fall off the bandwagon and go back into some habit patterns or have an argument with my partner tomorrow or whatever it is. But we begin to understand that it's not about holding on to that expansive state. All we're doing is planting the seed of paying attention through the expansion, paying attention through the contraction. Because as humans, we're always expansion and contraction, and learning how to get past that duality so that what sustains is the attention, which I shared earlier as an expression of love. So just to answer your question a little more thoroughly, even if we fall off the bandwagon, we're getting to see more clearly then, oh, what called me into this habit pattern again? How did I get here? And we get to see it more clearly each time that we circle around paying attention, so that what actually happens is not that we finally solve ourselves, right? But that we get bored of that habit pattern. We get bored of suffering. And getting bored of suffering, I think, is the very best place a human being can get to. I'm actually bored of it. I'm done. It's not that exciting as I thought. And so people are ready then to set it down. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah.
One other area that we mentioned on the page describing today was this notion of fierce compassion and mindful inquiry. So in a way, a lot of what you've been talking about has a gentler quality about it. And yet sometimes there are situations that call for some fierceness as well. I'd love to for you to share just a little about your perspective on when is that fierce compassion called for, and how do we do it in a way that doesn't actually translate into some of the judgmentalness that is that which we're really looking to outgrow as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing I would say is, even in sitting meditation, fierce compassion is called for. We're learning how to relax into the effortless, compassionate awareness that is always here. We're learning how to drop into stillness and non-doing and receptivity. And even in sitting, each time a habitual thought arises, a story arises, assessing mind arises, it takes fierce compassion to notice what's arising and then drop it, to let it go, to bring ourselves back to presence. It takes fierce compassion just to show up each day. This is, again, compassionate self-discipline for practice. That's an expression of fierce compassion. But as we're going along, we begin to see places where it's almost like we need to get out the Zen sword and cut through a delusion, cut through a limiting belief. we see ourselves about to make a choice that we know where that road goes, and it takes fierce compassion to say, no, you are not going there. I love you too much. We're not doing that again. And so people develop this skill through practice. Both a really receptive and an expressive side are required. And actually in my teachings on relational mindfulness, we go a lot more into how to access fierce compassion regarding others as well. There are times when we need to, through transparency, speak up about something that's really hard to speak up about, or set a boundary with someone, but in a kind way. So we can take these actions that sometimes as meditators we think, oh, I'm supposed to be more passive. It's not at all about that, creating a duality between passive and active. It's about having clarity about how compassion can express in a more receptive way and a more expressive way. And the more centered we become, and we're deepening our own ability to center every day that we show up to practice, the more we understand fierce compassion. Yeah.
That sounds like a particularly powerful set of teachings for activists out there who are deeply concerned about the trajectory of things, but want to engage in a way that is coming from this deeper source you're talking about.
Yeah, it is. And yet even now in these divisive times, almost everyone I'm finding needs a set of tools for just how to engage with others regarding politics and what's happening in the world from a more fierce compassion place, like knowing how to speak your truth, but how to do so kindly and with care, knowing how to really listen with others and consider their perspective equal, but not react, right? So all of that is fierce compassion. Yeah.
So Eden, this is what you're offering is clearly very important medicine for our time, so that we can really find this source point within ourselves of deep unconditional love and deep self-compassion that then becomes a kind of river that flows out to everything else in our life, from our relationships to our work to how we engage in positive change work. So the program that Eden is offering is called Threshold to Freedom, a 7-step journey of mindful self-renewal, fierce compassion, and conscious intentions. You can find it at selfrenewalcourse.com, selfrenewalcourse.com. And it's going to be a 7-week program that really offers a different kind of template for starting the new year. And in fact, we can actually start the program and the process in December, because when you sign up today, you're going to get a special live bonus workshop before the holidays begin to help you really build into this new way of setting intentions and engaging in a new year, not sourced from a bunch of shoulds from the outside, but really about your organic expression of who you are, and having that emerge out of compassionate practice rather than an imposed set of outer disciplines. So we'll share a little bit about that. First, the workshop in December is on December 15th on a Saturday at 10 a.m. And it's how to apply the 9 principles of relational mindfulness during the holidays. Since this is a time that often is both beautiful and blessed, but also stirs up a lot in terms of our relationships to family and sometimes intimate friends, this gives you a great way to kind of enter into the holiday season as a time of releasing a lot of what might not serve you anymore from the last year, and opening to a more compassionate journey through the holidays. And this will really set a great foundation for entering into the whole journey of Threshold to Freedom in the new year. So we're delighted, Eden, to be partnering with you on this, very grateful to do so, and love for you to share in your own words, what are you most excited to offer during Threshold to Freedom, and how are people going to benefit from this journey with you?
Yeah. Stephen, I'll first say that I'm really happy to be partnering with the Shift Network on behalf of the greater good. That feels really exciting and really timely in terms of the medicine our world needs right now. And I'm really excited about the invitation to spend 7 whole weeks together at this potent time of year. So again, to really bring graceful closure to the 1 whole year of life, and to seed consciously and powerfully the next cycle, the next year ahead. And I'll share some of the teachings, some of the modules that I'll be guiding people through. And so the first is seeing through the solidity of your sense of self. And so really giving people an invitation to look more deeply at limiting beliefs, at identity. In my own experience, of cutting through delusion again and again and again in my life, it is shocking. It's continually shocking how much delusion we're believing, how much of what we're believing about ourselves or perceiving about others or the world is not true, and the freedom that opens up when we learn to become clear seers. So the second module is about recognizing the emptiness at the heart of self-improvement. What a relief that we can get off the treadmill of self-improvement. What a relief to see fully how it isn't serving us, and that there's an easier but also more powerful, more demanding but more joyful path to allowing ourselves to become and to be who we're really here to be. The third module is opening to the heart's recognition of a deeper reality. And this is the module in which we'll actually be ready and ripe to create our new declarations for the year ahead. And you'll be receiving support in all of the weeks after that for how to embody, because embodiment is key here, the declarations that you've come up with, so that you're not just setting these ideas, but you're really, through compassionate self-discipline and knowing yourself more fully and receiving support from me as a teacher, able to step into this new possibility or remembered possibility. The fourth module is metabolizing and moving beyond fear, resistance, and doubt, meeting every part of you with compassion. And so, of course, this is about fierce compassion, and it's about letting everything that arises within us and for us be our teacher of love, of a more powerful understanding of love. I get really excited about this module just because I have had a lot of fear in my practice, and for years I was sort of about pushing through the fear. This is an example of the old paradigm of discipline, pushing through the fear and always pushing myself to be courageous. But I wasn't accessing genuine courage, not until I learned how to instead hold the hands of the one who's afraid, hold the hands of the fearful one, really work compassionately and understanding that part. And through that process, I have become an incredibly courageous person. I figure that if I can, anyone can. So we need courage in our world right now more fully. The next module is living a deeper truth in your body by aligning with a more authentic pace. This is so important because this is a unique moment in human history when we receive more information each day than we can keep up with. We're living in a moment in time when there's a lot of glamorization of busyness, more use of technology and computers, but not in skillful ways such as this. And so when I left the monastery, I began a journey of learning how to live in the world without being of the world. And by that I mean learning how to honor my authenticity and my natural pace, my authentic self while living in this world. And that's part of what we study and learn in this next module, balance and personal sustainability in today's world. The sixth module is about relational mindfulness, and it's called Deep Listening as the Path. And so this is really about, now that we have a stronger expression within ourselves, how do we bring those gifts to our interactions with others, to our relationships, to the workplace, to love. And this module is really based on the teachings from my newest book, Relational Mindfulness. And extending into module 7, how do we then hold our deepest intentions, also living in this time of conscious response being needed to the state of our world and a lot of pain to feel about the state of the world. So meeting the world skillfully, mindfully, and courageously. So we cover a lot of territory, but it all stems from this seed that we'll plant deeply of self-acceptance and seeing more clearly ourselves, understanding the instrument of who we are, and being really empowered by our intentions. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to that.
It's a blessing to have you do so. And I circling back, it really feels like you've identified the fix-it impulse in ourselves as really rooted in a kind of conditional love and a kind of a separation and dissociation that is the root issue. And so I think you've designed this so beautifully to kind of go into the core of that, unravel that in a very compassionate way, so that you meet every part of yourself with that compassionate wholeness. and then to realign what's moving forward from that, your pacing in life,
Yes.
more organic, which I love that you're bringing in that sensibility of the natural sensibility, and then into relationship, and then ultimately the world. So it's like people are shifting the ground out of which everything else moves first, and then experiencing the fruits. So very beautiful work. This program is going to include 7 sessions with Eden, which includes live interactive Q&A time. We are going to do these on audio, which creates a unique kind of intimacy. It's almost like the teacher is whispering in your ear, and there's a way in which it actually can be even feel sweeter and more intimate to do it as an audio program. And you're going to be able to engage and ask questions as well. So you'll get the audio recordings, you get transcripts, and you also get a number of extra guided meditations from Eden, which you're going to be able to do throughout the program that really enhance your journey. There's a few other things I want to mention. First of all, we've kept the investment very accessible for this program. You get the full 7-week journey, plus all the bonuses and the extra workshop that I mentioned when you sign up today, and you get it at the price of just 3 payments of $109 or 1 payment of $297, which you save a little bit when you pay in full. So I'll share a little bit more about the special bonuses. So first of all, there was the one that I mentioned today, which is how to apply the 9 principles of relational mindfulness during the holidays. It's going to happen on Saturday, December 15th at 10 a.m. Really helps you clear out the departing year and open to navigating the holidays in a totally different way. Eden, you want to share anything about that special bonus when people get when they sign up by midnight tonight?
Yeah, we brought a lot of care and thought to what topic we wanted to cover then. And I'm so aware every year as a teacher of how many students and how many loved ones are having some challenges come up in the holiday season, that it's both a beautiful time and also a dynamic time. It's a powerful mirror, the holidays, for where we are and where our relationships are. So we really wanted to offer support. The 9 principles of relational mindfulness are changing many lives out there, and they're so simple and accessible. So we're going to be talking about how to apply them to the holiday season and to your relationships, to yourself, all of it. Yeah.
Well, it's a great extra bonus and really great incentive to go to the page at selfrenewalcourse.com and give it a read today and tune in and make your decision now, because when you sign up today, you not only get this extra bonus with Eden on relational mindfulness in the holidays, but you also really begin the journey now, which helps to expand the time for this really a paradigm shift in how you relate to yourself and ultimately the world. There's also an extra bonus that we are doing that is included as part of what we're calling, the immediate sign up bonus. And this is a relational mindfulness for leaders, change agents, and activists. So this is a dialogue between Eden and Nina Simons, who is quite an extraordinary leader, who is a co-founder of Bioneers and Cultivating Women's Leadership. She's really, the two of them are co-teaching a life-changing training for leaders called Leading from Relational Mindfulness. And so that's also an extra bonus with the two of them when you sign up by the end of today. So it's a great journey that on the offering here, and what you can, I think, really tell from how Eden is shared today is that she really is, this is an authentic expression of her soul. It's not some just drive to be like a big famous teacher or something. It's like she's really offering the fruits of a deep journey of her own compassionate self-inquiry that's led to a very heartful, very powerful way to engage life that is authentic and deep and true. So Eden, it's been a beautiful hour together. Any just last thoughts that you want to speak directly to folks who are considering whether to join you for the 7-week journey of?
Sure. Yeah, Stephen, I really enjoyed being here with you. And I think there's a couple things I want to offer. And one is just my experience within myself and in those I've worked with is the amount of energy and vitality of life force that gets freed up when we become more aware of how the myth of self-improvement has been operating within us, and we release that, is tremendous. It's huge. It's vitality and energy that is then yours and belongs to your heart. And if we look out at our world at large, we can also see the degree to which so much human energy is going to this myth of self-improvement, which supports this kind of self-referencing bubble and the myth of separation. that it's up to me, I'm separate, there's something wrong with me, I need to fix and change myself. The amount of energy, money, resources, just on a larger scale that's going to that is tremendous. And again, when we address it within ourselves and really give ourselves that gift of being free from it, there is so much vitality and peace, and I would say relief, tremendous relief. So if that's part of what you're seeking, I truly hope that you'll join me. And I'm honored to be here, Stephen. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Beautiful. So thank you, Eden, for that beautiful invitation and this time together. And thank you all for joining us. You are warmly welcome to join Eden in the journey of Threshold to Freedom. And now you're going to get the extra great bonuses today with the extra workshop and for relational mindfulness, and also with Nina Simons when you sign up by midnight. It's really a pleasure and honor to do this work, and is so important to shift the very ground of our being so that we can shift the world around us. So if you're feeling called at all, I encourage you to go to selfrenewalcourse.com and get signed up right away. So thank you, Eden, and bye all.